lovelies. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make our lovely little bunnies. We've got a girl version and a boy version. So this is Belle and this is Beau. So the pattern packs that we've got for the little bunny kits, everything's included in there for you to make your lovely little bunny. So you have your skin fabric for your bunny. You have your dress fabric, outfit fabric. You have a piece of polycotton that's used to line the bodice of the dress or the romper. And then in your small little pack you've got elastic, a little bow, some lace, embroidery thread for doing the face, and a couple of press studs. So yeah, so those are all the items that are included in your bunny kit, as well as the pattern book. So along with all the fabrics that you can purchase for your kit, we've now actually got the physical pattern books. So these are included in the complete sewing kit for your Belle and Beau Bunny. And in the pattern book is you've got all your pattern pieces at the back, which you can photocopy onto card. And then all the way through are the instructions on how to make your lovely little bunny, all in a step-by-step format. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do our ears first. So I've lined up my bunny fabric and I've lined it on top of my patterned fabric, 2 pieces. And I'll take my ear pattern and an erasable marker pen, place my ear pattern onto the fabric, and then I'm just going to draw around the outside edge of the ear pattern. Okay, so I'll do that on both pieces. Now this marked line that I've done with my air erasable marker pen, this is the stitching line. Okay, so I've sewn around my marked line where my pen line is. I've just sewn around on that marked line. There's one that I've turned already. So what you need to do next is take your pinking shears and just snip away that seam allowance close to the stitch line, but obviously not cutting the stitches. So take that all the way around the ear, and then with some straight scissors just cut that straight edge off at the bottom on that line as well. So we're just going to cut through there, and then we're going to turn our ear. Now I find the easiest way to do this is to just pinch a bit out at the top. Take my hemostat scissors, lock on, and just push it through. Okay, so now it's turned. I'll take the dotting tool. This is one of those dotting tools just for pressing out the seams. So just ease those seams out along the outer edges, just so that you haven't got an inverted seam going back inwards on the fabric. So that's done all the way around. Okay, so now my 2 ears are ready for a very light iron. Okay, so I've pressed my ears nice and flat, and I've also turned those outside edges in to meet in the middle, and I've done a couple of rows of stitching just along the bottom edge there, just to keep that in place. So here's my main body of my bunny, which I've drawn out using an air erasable marker pen. So I've traced around the pattern piece all the way around. You can see I haven't got a specific seam allowance. I've just cut it out on a random shape. And that's what we do with all my doll patterns. You don't actually cut a seam allowance prior to sewing. It can just be out on any random shape as long as you've got your marked line around your pattern piece. Now with this bunny one, I've also just redrawn from behind. You can sort of see it does come through. I've redrawn the top edge of the bunny's head, indicating the little 4 points where the ears are going to be placed. So this is the side that I'm going to be stitching the body around. So this is the main side uppermost with the marked line. I turn it over and I'm going to position my ears on that straight edge there, and because this is my sewing line, my ear needs to go slightly above. I pop in a couple of pins, one there and one there, and then the same with the other ear. It's going to cross over the first, so lining it up with that straight edge there, but taking it beyond so that my stitch line that I've done on those ears is beyond the marked pen line. Pop that in there. Again, another couple of pins just to hold in place, like so, and then I'm going to go and just do a stitch line all the way through that top section of the head there, catching the ears in. I've sewn just along that top edge there, just with a small stitch, just to hold these ears in place. So I can take my pins out, and then over on the other side is my marked pen line. So I'm taking my second piece of fabric, again just randomly cut, no seam allowance, and then I'm going to pin all the way around. Now when you're pinning all the way around, do bear in mind that your ears are under there, so you might have to just tweak them over because you don't want to catch them in your stitching line. So just make sure that your ears aren't caught, especially on that neck curve there. That's where they may hit your needle as you're sewing, so just pull it over so you know that it's out of the way. Okay, so just pins randomly placed, and now I'm going to sew from the bottom edge, leaving that bottom edge there open. So from that bottom corner there, I'm going to sew all the way up through the shoulders, into the neck, round the head and down. Now when you get to this point up there, you should be able to see your stitch line that you stowed your ears on with. So what you need to make sure that you do is when you do this row of stitching all the way around, is just to bring it under slightly. If you don't, when you turn it the right side out, you'll still see those stitches that you did earlier to sew the ears on. Okay, so I'm going to go and sew that little lot. Okay, so my bunny's body is sewn all the way around. So the next thing for me to do is to snip back those seams just like I did on the ears. Now again, just go careful when you're snipping around. You need to take it back quite far to the stitch line, but not so far that you're going to cause the fabric to pull open as you're using the dotting tool to smooth out those seams. So it's getting that happy medium of having a nice close cut seam allowance, but not so close that you're going to poke your dotting tool through. And like we did on the ears, that edge there at the bottom, that's just going to be a straight cut, like so. And now we're going to turn the body the right side out. So just pull that through from that bottom edge. You can grab those little ears to help ease it through. And then again, use your dotting tool just to nicely smooth out those seams all the way around. Gently does it because you don't want to push through that seam allowance. Give it a little pull on that inner section there where the neck edge is, just to ease that stitch out a bit. Lovely. So next thing for me to do is to stuff the top of our bunny's body. So we're going to use a good quality toy stuffing, a polyester toy stuffing, like we do with all our dolls. And I'm using my hemostats to help poke the stuffing up. Just going to pull off a few little chunks, it makes it easier for working. And you can just roll that body bit back a little bit while you're stuffing the top of the head. So just roll that back, make a nice little hole for your stuffing to go into. Get your hemostats and just start poking in. Get the stuffing into the shoulders. So as long as your head's nice and firm and your neck, it can get slightly lighter in the stuffing as you go down. Now, before I go any further, I'm just going to turn this lower raw edge back in on itself and put in some pins just to hold in place. So the front and then the back. Fold that closed. Hold it closed rather. Just check my stuff in. Yeah, that seems to be enough there. Okay, good. There we go, fasten on my thread. And then I'm just going to run just a slip stitch all the way through. Just fasten off the end there. Snip my ends, that one and that one. Okay, so that's the top half of the bunny's body complete. So the next thing we're going to do is the legs. So here are the 2 legs and the 2 arms, and like I did with the ears, this is double-sided fabric, right sides together. And I've just taken my pattern piece and I've drawn around the leg twice and I've drawn around the arms twice, and then I've sewn around each piece while they're all still on the one piece of fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to separate them all. And then my next job is to just again pink around the edges of all the pieces. and the tops need that straight cut edge. Okay, so I will continue to cut round those other 3 limbs. All sewn round, all snipped on the edges. So the next thing for me to do is to turn them the right side out. So, oh, that squeaky chair, I'm so sorry about that chair, I must put some oil on it. Okay, so just take the bottom of the foot, push it up here a little bit, take your hemostats, lock on at the bottom so it's not going to move, and then just drag that back up through. Unlock. And then same principle as before, gently smooth out that seam. And because it's such a small little leg, arm, body, whatever you were doing, make sure that when you push that seam out that you're really doing small little pieces at a time, and that will prevent you from getting any like square edges or sort of hard angles. So yeah, just take your time and do it in very small little increments of pressing it out. And then that helps to take away any of those hard sort of angled areas. Okay, straight out the side of the leg. Lovely, so that's one leg done. I'm going to continue with the other 3 limbs and I'll meet you back here. I just want to show you how to do this little arm, because turning this little arm can be a little bit troublesome, but where there's a will, there's a way. So same thing, take the hand area and turn it up. Good if you've got a nail because you can push it through. Take your hemostats and hook on to that bottom bit. And the same principle as before, just feed it through. Actually, if I do it in that way, you might be able to see better. Push it against my tummy. So I'm just feeding it up through. My hemostats are locked on, so it's not going to slip or fall off. And then I'm bringing it out through that little sidey bit, and I can see it's just appeared here. Just a little tiny bit there. So what I'm going to do is grab hold of that, unlock the hemostats, and then I can pull that through. So where there is a will, there is a way, like I was saying. Just about get your dotting tool back in down through there to smooth out that seam. And then when you get to the top, you might need to use some tweezers just to get that shoulder part of the arm back round, because it's on a curve, that top bit. So you might have to just sort of push it in. If you can't get it up there like that, it depends on how thick the fabric is that you're using, but what you can do is you could always use tweezers to manipulate it to get it into the right position. That one come through quite nicely. And then you just need to make sure that that side edge, that's where you're putting the stuffing in, that little weenie hole there, just make sure that that seam allowance is pressed back in. Give it a nice little squeeze with your fingers, and that'll keep that nice and flat. So yeah, the arms are really tiny. They do turn, and where there's a will, there's a way. Now on to stuffing. Okay, let's do the leg first. So again, just take some small little pieces of stuffing at the ready, and then it's easy just to grab those while you're working. So you're going in from the top. Oh yeah, hemostats, so just a little bit, and in it goes. Taking it right down to that foot area, and again making it quite firm in the foot. Pushing it into that nice curved shape. Oh, don't want quite all that much. And like you do with your dolly legs, you're just layering the stuffing up. You're not pushing the whole thing right the way down. You're just overlapping the stuffing pieces as you go. Now I want it quite firm on the foot, but I want it very relaxed at the top. So I don't want hardly any stuffing in the top of the leg. You know what, I'm going to go and get some, can you hear that chair? I'm going to go and get some cooking oil on it. Stop it from squeaking. Okay, I think that'll be enough. So just gently push it in that top bit because you want very little stuffing in the top of the leg. And the same applies to the arm. So you can see it's nice and firmly stuffed at the foot area, and then it gets lighter from about middle section to more or less non-existent at the top. There is a little bit of stuffing in that top bit, but not an awful lot. And then the same as you did for the body, you're just going to turn that seam allowance over at the top there, poke it down. Again, use your hemostats because that helps to ease it over, if not your tweezers. And just pop in one pin there just to hold that in place as I slip stitch that closed. I'll just show you me stuffing this top of this little arm. So once you've done the firm hand and then the arm, and then you need to get some stuffing, a little bit of stuffing just into that curved shoulder part of the arm. So it only needs to be a little bit. And then just push that in. So yeah, like I said, it's very, very light in that top area there. There is stuffing in there, but it's very, very soft. So just pop a pin in there. I will now slip stitch all those top edges and those side edges. Okay, so now we're going to sew our legs onto our bunny. So I've attached my thread coming out from the side edge of the bunny's body. I'm going to take my first leg and I'm going to lay it on top of the bunny's body, and I'm basically just going to do a slip stitch through the leg and the body. And when you've got your first one sewn on, take your second one and line the edge of that leg up with the edge of the body on the other side. Then fasten off on that outside edge. Okay, so there's your bunny's legs sewn on. She sits as well. So I fastened on my thread on that seam there, side seam, and I'm going to take my arm, and this has got the slip stitched side of the arm going towards the back. Okay, so from the front you don't see that. So I'm just going to position my arm right on the edge of that shoulder, pop in a couple of pins just to hold in place, and then it's very similar to the way that you do your Polly Dolly. Just going to, you can either do mattress stitch or you can just do a slip stitch, doesn't really matter which way you do it. So I'm just going to start from the outside edge, a little bit on the outside edge there. And I'm just doing a little tiny mattress stitch just along the top. I'll take that pin out now, don't need that one in there. Going to turn her upside down and just do a couple of stitches underneath as well, just hold in place. And then just fasten my thread off underneath that side seam there, and then finally just sink that tail. Okay, so she has one arm, so I will continue to sew the other arm on the other side. Okay, so we've got our limbs sewn on, our little bunny, and the next thing we're going to do is do her face. So, first thing you need to do is to place a couple of pins on where you would like the eyes. So roughly in the middle of the head. And then we're going to place another pin where we want her nose. Just going to move that over slightly. And then lastly, she's going to have little slanting eyebrows, and they're quite high up. And the eyebrow starts parallel with the corner of the eye, so around about here. So I'm just going to pop in a pin here. So that area inside there will be the eyebrow, and the same the other side. So when you've got your two pins in for your eyes and one for your nose, you need to just place a little mark with your air erasable marker pen. So to find the right place is take your pin and just wiggle it a bit, and then that will produce a slight little hole there, just a pinhole, and that's what you can use to add your little line. Same with the nose, so I can see where that is. And the same with the eyebrows. Just a little line going through there. Okay. Then we also just need to do a little bit of a split lip down there. So lengthen that line down and then bring it across. So it basically looks like a T shape. That's for the little nose and the split lip. So the bottom of the eye is parallel with the little T shape of the nose. So there's the top of your nose. So the bottom of the eye is going to be about there, each side. And then the top of the eye just slightly above that dot that I've done. Okay, so now I've got a guide for the eye length and the nose length. So I've fastened on my black embroidery thread. Now I fasten on at the back of the body because you don't see this part of the bunny because she's got her clothes on. So I always tend to do my fastening on at the back there. So bring that thread through the back and up to the top position of the eye. So bring that out. Make sure it's not twisted at the back. And then you're going to do one line, one stitch, one line down to the bottom of that little line that you've put in there. And you're going to bring it back up and out more or less through the same place that the thread came out from. So what you're doing is you're making a double stitch here. Use your finger or your needle as that you're pulling that thread through, just to make sure that it's not all twisted. That just helps it to lay flat. And then I'm going to take it back down again through that same hole and out through the other side to the other eye. Again, make sure your thread's not twisting. Repeat again, so one stitch to the bottom little mark, back up through where the thread more or less came in. Check your thread. And then another stitch, and this time back down through where the thread came out, and this time we're taking it back to the back of the body. Okay, and then we can fasten that off. Sink the tail. Get rid of that little tail in there. Okay, so that's the eyes done. Okay, now I've fastened on my pink thread, my pink embroidery thread, and I'm going to bring this out to the side of the nose. The same thing again, I'm going to do 2 stitches for the nose. And these are going horizontal, not vertical. So one there. Back in to where that thread came out. And back to the back of the body. And fasten that one off. And this time I've rethreaded on the black embroidery thread, but I've separated just 2 of these strands from the main. So we've only got 2 strands here. This is for the eyebrows, the split lip and the eyelashes. Oh, don't want to lose that. Okay, so it's fastened on and I'm taking it out to the top of the eyebrow, to the side there of the eyebrow. So you need to make sure that you've got a good long needle before you start, so that it's going to reach to where you want to go to. So just keep poking until you get there. That's good. Bring that out. And we're in the beginning of the eyebrow and we're going underneath the head and we're bringing it out from the beginning of the second eyebrow. So that's created that first eyebrow. Then we're going to take it back in and we're going to bring it out at the top of the eye. So I'm actually going through the thread in the eye. And we're going to do the first eyelash. So take the thread off at an angle, bring it back in to the thread on the eye. So there's your first eyelash. The next one is fairly close, but slightly shorter. And then pull that one through. And then the final eyelash is tiny and it's more or less straight across. And then when you've done that one, you're going to take the thread back to the top of the other eye. So we've got those 3 little eyelashes. So just have a look and see where your first eyelash, what sort of angle your first eyelash is, and then that will give you a good gauge. I mean, what you can do is you could even put in a little pin when you've got the angle right. You could just put in a little pin so you know where you've got to go in from. So we're going in from here. Let's take that pin out now. Back into the thread on the eye. First eyelash. Second eyelash. Third eyelash, and then this eyelash, again make sure your threads are fitting in nicely. So this eyelash, this one is coming out on the nose because this is going to be used now for the split lip. So we're taking that out there. Just check the eyelashes are alright. Yeah, that's good. And then this is going down that line, down that vertical line and coming out the back. Okay, so now your bunny has got a little face. Just get that a little bit straighter. That's better. And then you can fasten off at the back again. Okay, so yeah, so there is your completed bunny with her little face on. So next we're going to make her dress. So I've got my 2 pieces of fabric. I've got my main patterned fabric, beautiful rainbow fabric here, matching my nails, with my polycotton on the top. And I've drawn around my bodice pattern piece with an air erasable marker pen. I don't know whether you can see, I have actually positioned that rainbow so that it's going to be in the middle of the bodice, she says, hopefully. And then what you do is you sew all the way around the body. So up the back, around the neck, shoulders, armholes, shoulder, neck, shoulder, armhole, shoulder, neck, back seam. And you leave this bottom area open and free. You leave this bottom area unstitched. Okay, so that's what I'm going to go and do now. Okay, so I've sewn around my bodice. Next thing to do is to cut back the seam allowance using some pinking shears. Again, the same principle applies. Don't go too close to the stitches. However, you need to go close enough that you're not going to have too much bulk inside. Okay, so next bit, so I've done all the way around the bodice apart from the armholes with the pinkins. I'm going to use my normal scissors to do the edge of the armholes. Reason being is because you can gauge it better, get it in close to the stitch line, and then just snip off those tips where the shoulder seams are, and then along the tight curve of the armhole just do some very tiny little snips without going through the stitch line, so that you can turn it and the stitches will lay flat. So cut off the bulk of the corners. And then a couple of little snips on that curve of the armhole. Then that lower line there, that gets cut straight with your scissors. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is turn it the right side out. Using your dotting tool, just ease those seams out. Again, don't push too hard because you don't want to break through. Okay, that armhole, just give it a gentle pull so that that will lie nice and flat. If you hadn't done the snips there, then you won't get that flatness. So it's really important that you do those little snips on the inside edge of the armhole. Just a little gentle pull and a little pull around the neck. And then that will all lay nice and flat. Now, when you were sewing it on the machine, when you got to that top bit there where the shoulders are, I always count how many stitches I do here. So when I did my first shoulder, I counted, I did 5 stitches, and I've got a 2.5 stitch length. So I did 5 stitches along there. So when I got to the next shoulder, I made sure I did 5 again, and then 5 again, and then 5 again. And that way, when you come to sew the shoulder seams together, they will match and fit perfectly because they've got the same stitch count on each shoulder seam. Okay, so I'm going to go and iron that. Okay, so here's the bodice, all nicely ironed, nice and flat. Okay, and you can at this stage just check it fits your bunny just by wrapping it around her, just to make sure that everything is as it should be. And then moving on to the skirt, so I've cut the skirt length out for the dress. It's pink in shears at the bottom, pinked at the sides, and a straight edge at the top. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run 2 rows of gather stitches along the top edge, and I'm going to sew a line of very thin lace along this bottom edge here, the pinked edge. So I've put my gather stitches in, I've sewn my lace along the bottom edge, and I've also, when I did my gather stitches, I just turned those side edges back and I ironed them flat. So the next thing we're going to do is attach our skirt to our bodice, and on the bodice I've also sewn just a stitch line along the bottom there just to keep those 2 layers together. So I'm going to find the centre point of my bodice, which I would say is about there, and then with right sides facing on my skirt, find the centre point of my skirt, just do a pinch there, and then I'm going to line that up with my centre point of the bodice. I'll take my outside edge of my skirt to the outside edge of my bodice, and I'll line the 2 up. Just going to put in another pin just prior to that one, and then I take my 2 top threads, which are my needle threads, and that's my red threads. I don't want the blue ones because they're from my bobbin. I'm not going to pull up on them, I'm going to pull up on the needle thread and not the bobbin thread, so I keep my blues behind. Take my 2 red threads, hold on to them both and just pull and ease those gathers through. And you just keep pulling on the threads and easing the gathers through. Now you can go further than what you need, because that's fine, because then you just pull it back so that the skirt fits into the bodice. And then just tie that off a couple of times, and then you can see that all the gathers are all bunched in one area. So I've got no gathers there, but I've got a whole bunch of them here. So all I do now is I just tweak them out so that all the way through that section of the skirt onto the bodice, they're all laying evenly. They're evenly positioned and evenly spaced. And I'm just going to put 1 pin in there to hold. So that's that half ready in place for sewing, and then just repeat for the other side. So centre back of the skirt, centre back of the bodice, line it up, pop in a pin, add a second pin, take the red threads, the 2 top threads, which are my needle thread, that one there and that one there. Don't touch the blue ones. If you pull on the blue bobbin threads, it tends to lock it. You don't get as good a gather when you gather up bobbin threads. So whenever I sew my gather stitch, I've always got my wrong side facing, so I know my needle thread is always uppermost, and now I always do that red. Well, I usually always do it red. Okay, so grab those 2 threads there, put those behind, and holding both together, pull these ones through. keep pulling up. You get to feel when it's nice and tight. Okay, so I've over gathered, that's fine. I'll just pull it back to fit. Take those threads, wrap it around that needle. That's a pin actually, wrap it around that pin. And then tweak those gathers out so that they're laying nice and symmetrically along the bodice. And then pop in one more pin. Now another thing you can do with your gathering is I always do this on my skirts because it really does make all the difference. Before you sew it, if you hold on to the gathered end and you hold on to the bottom end and you give it a slight pull in between your two thumbs, it tends to pull out the gathers and they lay much more flatter along that top edge. So you really do get a nice line of gathers as you're sewing. So yeah, it's worth taking the time to do that. Just thumb at the top on the gathers, thumb at the bottom, and just pull. And that stops any bunching along the top there. Okay, so now I'm going to go and sew 2 rows of stitching. One with my normal seam allowance, and then a second one above that, close to the first line. And then after I've done that, I will get my pinking shears and I will snip off the small area of seam allowance. I've sewn one line. Before I do that second line above, I just want to show you how easy it is to remove your gathering stitches. So you pulled up on the red threads, so you just pull again on the red threads to pull the whole lot through, and now you're just left with the blue threads under there. So you take the blues and you pull those through as well, and all your gathering threads have gone. If I'd have pulled on my blue threads, I would have locked all the gathers together and I wouldn't have been able to have got them out. So you only ever pull on one thread. So that's why I have this system whereby when I'm doing gathering, I always have red in my needle thread and blue in my bobbin thread. So I know never to pull on the blue thread because it will lock all the gathers in place. Okay, I'm just going to go and do that second little row of stitches along the top there. Look, such a cute little dress for your bunny. So you can just sort of check that it's looking good. Oh, that is just so sweet. Right, last thing to do with this little dress is to just sew those shoulder seams together. So turn it over, get your needle and thread, just fasten on your thread in the top corner of the shoulder. And then what you're doing is you are lining up those shoulders together. When you sew, try to pick up a piece of the pattern fabric from the top shoulder, a piece of the pattern fabric from the underneath shoulder, and again a slip stitch is all it needs. So a piece of the pattern fabric from the top shoulder into the piece of the pattern fabric on the bottom shoulder. Work your way all the way along and then pull it out flat. And then you are going to take a piece of the top lining into the, so lining on one side into the lining on the other side. So into the lining, into the lining. Again, small little slip stitches. So easy to do, and it's just the most effective way and the easiest way of making little bodices is to do it as a flat version first and then just sew these shoulder seams together. So I'll show you that one. So pulled out the right way. So there you have your little shoulder seam sewn together. Almost invisible really. You would have thought you'd have done it the other way around. So yeah, it's a really good, easy, quick way to make a little bodice. So I'm now going to do the other one. So I'll turn it back that way and continue with that. So now on to the panties. So I've cut my 2 pieces. It's pinked along the bottom edge and normal cut along the rest. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my lace to the bottom hem of the panty leg. Then I'm going to put right sides together and I'm going to sew one section there on the centre seam. So I've sewn my lace on the bottom edge, and with right sides together I've just sewn that central seam there, pinked, and ironed it flat. Okay, so the next thing to do is we're going to just make a small casing at the top for the elastic to go through. So just make a tiny hem. Make sure that it's wide enough for your elastic to go through. So you can always just check to make sure that you've got your casing the right size. Then we're going to sew that little casing all the way along that top edge. Okay, so I've sewn my casing along the top. That's where the elastic's going to go. And the next thing I'm going to do is just going to put the elastic positioned onto the legs. So I've got 2 pieces of 7 centimetres in length elastic, and I'm just going to pin one end in place there and the other end in place there on each of the legs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it to the other side as well. I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm just going to sew some stitches just to hold that elastic on that outside edge there, and the same on that side. Now when I do that, I'm not going to cut the threads off because I need to use those threads to help me pull the fabric and the elastic through the machine. So just a little anchor threads on the outside edges there. So I've anchored my elastic just by sewing a couple of lines on that outside edge of the leg there and that outside edge of the leg there. Now what I've done is I've kept the threads on, and the reason being is because when I put this under my machine to start sewing, I've got those threads there that I can pull on as I'm pulling the fabric through. And what will happen is as you pull, the elastic will stretch to fit that leg, but you need something to pull on, so that's why I always leave those threads at that end to pull on them as I feed it through the machine. The stitch that I use for sewing this elastic on, it's a zigzag stitch, but it's got 3 rows. It's got 3 stitches in each of the zigzags. Haven't got a clue what it's called, but that's the one I use. So it's a zigzag, a small zigzag with 3 stitches on each of the zig and the zag. Okay, so I'm going to go and sew those. Okay, so there's the elastic sewn on. As you can see from underneath, it's all nicely gathered up now. So that's 7 centimetres sewn with that little zigzag stitch. Just pulls it in nicely and you get that nice little fluted effect. Yeah, quite a pretty little stitch for attaching elastic. So the next thing we're going to do is put the elastic through the casing on the top. So take 12 centimetres of elastic, pop a pin in and just start threading from that outer edge, bringing it through. So when you get past the halfway mark, just check your elastic, because you don't want to pull it right through. So there it goes. Just as it gets to that edge, pop a pin in it, and then take it to your sewing machine and just run a couple of rows of stitching along there, just to stop it going back in on itself. So I've sewn a couple of rows there, just to hold in place, so I can now continue to thread my pin through. Bring it out the other side. I'm not going to sort the gathers out yet. I'm going to leave them all bunched up in one place. I just need to get that elastic past the edge of the casing. Bring it back until it's just about to disappear. Pop a pin in that side. And the same thing, I'm going to go to my machine and I'm just going to sew that there to hold that in place. So I've now sewn down that little bit there as well. So as you can see, all the gathers are all bunched in that centre point there. So I just take my two outside edges and I pull nice and tight, bring it back, and now all my gathers are evenly spaced along the top edge of the casing. And then the final thing to do on these little panties is to take that other back centre seam and sew along there and pink those edges. A couple of pins in just to hold in place. So we'll go and sew that area there now. So I've sewn that back seam and I've ironed it out flat as best as you can on that tiny little piece of fabric. And so the last thing for us to do is just to sew these two bottom raw edges together. This is the crotch area, so line up the centre back seams, pop in a pin in the middle, and then do one on the one leg and on the other leg. And then now I'm going to go and sew that last little seam just along there. Okay, so that's that crotch seam sewn. Let's turn those little panties in the right way. What you need to do is just grab hold of those seams there and just give it a little pull. It just helps to stretch those stitches out a little bit. Okay. Aren't they just the cutest? Oh, Roger's home. Dogs are going to bark. Cut. 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 Cut.
Cut.
Now, aren't they just the cutest pair of panties that you've ever seen? They're just so cute, and obviously with the dress they look absolutely adorable. Okay, so now moving on to the boy outfit for our little boy bunny. So I've made the bodice exactly the same way that I made for the girl bunny, and I've actually sewn in the shoulder seams already. You can do that before or you can do it after, no problem. And then so this is going to be like a little romper. So the trouser part of the romper is exactly the same pattern for the panties, but it's just slightly longer in the length. So all I've done is I've sewn that centre back seam first, pinked the edge, sewn the centre back seam. The bottom hem of the leg was pinked, so I just turned that up and gave it an iron. And then on top of that I sewed in some white rickrack. And then I pressed it all out, so I pressed that seam out, and then I've run my 2 rows of gathering thread through the top edge. Okay, so it's really simple. All we're going to do, well, we know our centre point is the centre seam of the romper. So we just find our centre point of our bodice, which is here, and then I'm going to align the centre seam of the romper to where the pin mark is on the bodice. And then exactly the same as before, like we pulled the skirt up to fit the bodice, we are going to align the back of the romper to the back of the bodice. I've also turned that bit over there. I pinked that seam as well, turned that over, and that was caught into the gathering threads. So align that together, pop in your pin, taking your top thread, pull up on those. Now the gathers on the romper aren't as full as the gathers on the skirt, so it's just a slight gather that you will have. So pull that through. So yeah, it's just a small area of gather. Again, you can just eke that out. I like to keep it a little bit flatter in the front there, and then start the gathers from the side area, so more of the gathers to that side. Pop in another pin and then repeat for this side. Okay, so now I'm going to go and sew my 2 rows along the top there. Okay, and then finally with the romper, that just leaves me to do that last back centre seam. So just leave a little gap at the top there so we can get in and out. So we're just going to sew down that very small section there and then turn it through and sew the crotch area together. Okay, really cute little pair of rompers there for him. So I've attached his snap fasteners on the back section there. So I'm just going to show you a quick and easy way of attaching these snap fasteners, because I do know that they can be a little bit fiddly where they're so tiny. So a little tip is to leave them on the rod that they're supplied on and sew them on from that. Don't pick off each individual one and try to sew it on, because they're so small, it's really difficult to hold on to them. So what I do is obviously fasten on my needle and thread, and then I place the press stud that I need into position, and I hold the bulk of all the other press studs that are still on there, and then that frees up that little tiny press stud there for me to work with, so my fingers aren't covering the press stud as I'm trying to sew it on. It's just so much easier. So you can do all your little stitches. There's 4 holes in the press studs, and I just tend to do 2 stitches in each hole. So that gives you 8 stitches altogether that's holding the stud on. When I get round to the 3rd one, still all the press studs are all still on the rod. So what I do, once I've secured that 3rd hole, I then just snap off all the others. I know that's on there nicely now, that's not going to fall off, and I can just hold it with the edge of my thumb just to sew on the remaining last hole. So yeah, much easier if you're trying to sew your press studs on by picking them off the rod to start with. You know, you are going to be all fingers and thumbs. Much easier just to sew it on while it's still on that little rod. Bless them. So there's my little girl bunny and my little boy bunny, all nicely dressed. And I put a little bow on the front of her dress there. So the final thing for me to do, which is totally optional. I'm going to give them some shoes. So you're going to need your air erasable marker pen, and then you just need to draw out the shape of the shoe that you'd like. So I basically do like it looks like a little ballet slipper. So it's a crescent shape. On the toe end. And I do it so that it comes slightly higher on the outside edge. It just gives a nice shape for the shoe. And then turn it out. I'll just put a little mark where you're coming out on that seam, both sides. And then turn her over, and then you're going to join those two together. Like so. So you've got your marked line of where you want to add your glitter for your shoe. And because you're using an air erasable pen, if you do it wrong, you can just wait for that to dry, and then you could redo if you weren't quite happy with it. We'll do the second side at the same time. Turn her over and join up the back. Just have a look, make sure you're happy with that. Just going to bring it up a bit higher on the outside edge there. Yeah, okay, so my shapes are on. So the next thing for me to do is to apply PVA glue all over that lower foot area, ready for me to sprinkle on the glitter. So I'm just using a thin brush, and I start on the outside edge where that seam is, and just make sure I really load that glitter on. Actually, it's glue, isn't it? Make sure I really load the glue on. It does sink in quite a bit to the fabric. So do the front first and the back second. Make sure you get right into that seam that's on the foot. I'm just going to go back over because, like I say, it does absorb it. Being a fabric, the glue gets absorbed really quickly. So just put another layer on. And now we're ready to add the glitter. This is just a normal cosmetic glitter in a baby pink. Take my lid off, and then basically I just sprinkle it all over the foot. Like so. When I've done, I pat it down just to make sure that it's sticking into the glue, and then give her a little tap on the edge of her foot. Okay, so you've got a nice sparkly slipper. Turn her over and do the back. Same thing again, tap the glitter on, make sure you go underneath where that seam is. Give it a little pat down, make sure it's stuck to the glue. Shake her off. Okay, so that's the first of her 2 feet done. Okay, so we're just coming to the finishing the glue on the second foot. Give that another little tap over. Little pat down. And shake it off. Okay, just go careful that the two legs don't knock onto each other while the glue's still wet. So I normally just lay her on the side of my craft table just while her feet are drying, but I'm just going to pop her on top of my pin cushion for a moment. Legs akimbo. Jolly good. And then all you do to put your glitter back in the pot, because you've got a fold in your paper, you can just fold the two together and then just pour it in. Little tap. So you don't waste any glitter. It goes back in the pot. Okay. I'm going to leave her to dry. She's going to take a good couple of hours to dry, for that PVA glue to dry. And then after that I'm going to put a nail varnish top coat right over the top just to seal that glitter in. So the boy bunny's feet have now been glittered. So all that leaves now is to put on the top coat. So this is just like a nail varnish top coat. Nothing special. You can get this anywhere in your chemist. And I'm just layering this on, painting this on over the glitter. So their feet have been done, and then they've been top coated with both of them with the top coat nail polish. So they're nice and solid. The glitter's not going to flake off anywhere, so it's all nicely sealed in. So the last thing to do is just apply a little bit of blusher. So I've got my blusher brush. I've got this really tiny little blusher brush here, which is ideal because I don't want to put too much on them. So into my cosmetic blusher, brush it off on my tissue paper, and I'm just applying a very small amount to her cheeks. I'm just building up the colour as I go, because I don't want her to have too much of the blusher on at all. So it's just basically building it up nice and lightly in that area there. Okay, yeah, I think that's enough for them. Also, you may have noticed that the little boy bunny, he hasn't got any eyelashes, so those are omitted from the sewing when we're stitching on his face. These are ideal for photographing with Polly, especially if you make a dress that matches the bunny. It just looks so cute, it really does. So it's a lovely little addition that you can add to your Polly Dolly when you're gifting. So just to recap, we have fabric packs. We've got the bunny skin in this white dove colour. We've also got it in a warm sand, which is this colour. We've got the bunny colour in a pink, the bunny colour in a blue as well. So there's a few different choices to choose from with regards to the colours. We've got the PDF download for you to make your bunny, and we've also now got the new pattern book. So it's a physical printed pattern book which we post out to you in the post. So yeah, so quite a few options there for making your bunny, from a complete kit to fabric packs to books to PDFs. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this little bunny video, and I look forward to seeing your little bunnies on our group. Speak to you later. Bye.